Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, sexual harassment and misogyny are at play in the virtual world of online video games. Should they have real-world consequences? So if you're a gamer, you are going to be glued to the screen for the next 30 minutes. If you're not, well, digital producer Malika Valal should be looking out for you, right?
Yes, definitely. We both will. I think for those who aren't gamers in our community, there's a perception that what happens online doesn't really make a difference because it's not happening in the real world.
Right.
Well, there's one gamer who wrote in on the internet forum, Reddit, and she disagrees with that. Tabitha says the fact that it happens in a context that isn't literally face-to-face, it doesn't mean that it doesn't really happen. The online disinhibition effect is a thing, but it's still sexual harassment. We want to know your thoughts on this, whether you're a gamer or not. Tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
So the stream is your show. So tell us what stories you think the world isn't paying enough attention to. So you can check us out on Google Plus and let us know what you want to see on the show. It's really easy. You go to Google Plus and then you put in the stream and then you can scroll down and see some of our content and also share your ideas and they could end up in the stream.
My name is Martin Hall. I'm an associate professor specializing in research on pornography, and I'm in the stream.
Competitive games almost always bring out a little bit of trash talk, but what happens when the verbal ribbing develops sexual and perhaps violent overtones? Sexual harassment in online video games is so common that female players can sometimes be called sluts simply by saying hello. They're taunted with threats of molestation and sometimes even rape. Almost 1 billion people are now playing online games worldwide, and about 46% of them are women. That's according to Spill Games. But despite that number, the anonymous, competitive nature of multiplayer online games can be a breeding ground for sexual harassment. So what's driving the sexism, and can and should it be stopped? With us to talk about this in Seattle, we have James Portnow. He's a professional game developer who worked on the games Call of Duty and Farmville. He also writes for the weekly web series Extra Credits. In Wisconsin, we have gamer Jenny Hanover. She founded the website Not in the Kitchen Anymore, which highlights the abusive conversations taking place in online gaming. In Atlanta, Georgia, we have Celeste Headley. She's a journalist and an avid gamer who actually met her hubby playing the very popular World of Warcraft. And in Wyoming, Stephen Toulouse, the former head of enforcement for Xbox Live. So gamers, it's great to have you all here in the stream. I'm going to start with a little introduction for our non-gamers with a game called World of Warcraft. We're going to show you a live game in play right now. So there we go. It's on Twitch TV, which is an online channel. So you can watch people playing games around the world. Celeste Headley, who met her hubby on World of Warcraft, talk us through what's happening now.
It's hard to see that they're under something. Like, oh, you know where they are? They're in a battlefield. They're PvP, which is player versus player.
Right.
That's where you can group up with another player and fight. And in World of Warcraft, you in general can't just go around killing other players. But in PvP, that's where you're fighting to get points and stuff. It looks like that's what they might be doing.
There are so many.
Actually,
yeah, go ahead, Celeste.
Yeah, they're on a ship.
Right.
They're doing a. Okay, so in World of Warcraft, the great thing about the social community in World of Warcraft is they design certain tasks that you have to accomplish with other people.
All right.
And to a certain extent, this works really well because in order to play the game, you kind of have to be a good team member or you won't get anything done. If people don't like you and you're a jerk all the time, no one's going to want to play with you. You aren't going to be able to get content done. So what you're seeing right there is a daily task that you have to accomplish with other people. And in a game like World of Warcraft, which is an MMORPG, that stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game, you can kick people out of your group. So if somebody is being a jerk, you can vote to boot them.
So Jenny, we're just trying to get deeper into this culture that is the gaming culture. Who plays? Who do you play with? Who's the community?
Who do I play with?
Yeah.
Primarily 30-plus-year-old men. I'm actually a member of the Geezer clan, and it's called Geezer because we're old, or most of our members are older. A lot of my friends are older men and women who have families. Some of them have kids that are older than me. So it's an older group on my part.
So James, and you're designing the games for people. Who are you designing them for? You know that there's a market out there. So when you're thinking of the best game or the most popular game that you can actually produce next, who are you thinking of?
It used to be that we would aim solely for 14 to 21-year-old males, but over the last half decade we've learned that there's a much broader audience out there, and we need to, right? Games like Farmville and Candy Crush at this point outsell games like Watch Dogs or even some of the Call of Duty series.
The average gamer, Femi, is 30 years old now.
Right.
So, I mean, it really has changed. Many of the people I play with are grandparents, even much older than I am. I mean, I'm surprised that at 30 years old you'd be called a geezer, but I really do play with geezers, real geezers who are 60 and 70 years old.
And I mean, if we're going for average gamer statistics, the Entertainment Software Association this year released statistics showing that the average gamer is also female, right? There are actually more women who play on a regular basis than men. We just always think of games only as what you see on your Xbox. You only think of them as those hardcore shoot-'em-ups. Sure. And yeah, that may skew more towards men, but as a whole, as a community, skews older and actually does skew female.
So you mentioned community.
And here's another interesting thing to occur. Is that with people who are introduced to casual gaming through Candy Crush or other things, now they're realizing there may be some more depth if they were to buy a console, for instance.
Yeah.
But instead of buying the newer console, they're looking at the older console and seeing an enormous library of already established titles, and they're switching to that because they missed out on that whole generation.
All right, I don't want to insult the gamers out there, but if you've not played Candy Crush, it's kind of addictive. Do you want to explain it, Stephen, just very quickly?
I'm actually not the player in my family. My wife plays.
Your wife plays it. There's a little bit of stereotyping going on here. Why would that be?
Because for her, it's a kind of game that she can get into and out of very quick. It's a puzzle game, to be very quick about it. And it's very, very well constructed and well designed for getting in and having a great experience, getting in and getting out quickly. So it's perfect for waiting in line for something, or you just want a quick experience that's fun, colorful, and great. And that's sort of what people really love about it.
And we're looking at it right now because your wife has things to do. She cannot spend hours and hours and hours in a virtual world because she has stuff to do. Malika.
Right. Well, Femi, we've talked about the average gamer. Different focus. I want to change the focus a little bit here. We've talked about the average gamer, but Celeste, our community wants to talk about the landscape for what some of these games look like. So Rachel says, in terms of character development, there's proportionally more strong male leads. Women tend to be in secondary roles. Another person writes in saying that there's a normalization of a heterosexual white male space where outsiders aren't welcome. Do you find that to be true for you, Celeste?
Look, that's completely an understatement. I mean, even in the Mega Man series, let's take Mega Man as an example. There are about 80 characters that you can open up through Mega Man. One of them is female. And let's talk again about the type of female that, well, let me get to that in a second. But for example, when you have games that come out that do have a female that's possible, let's say, for example, Mass Effect is a really popular game. So you can choose to be either Commander Stevenson as a male or as a female. But in terms of the marketing, the only character that you will ever see in any of the marketing materials, on any of the magazines, on any of the box covers, anywhere featured, is the male. Even though people say that the voice actress who did the voice of Commander Stevenson as a female is a much better actress than the person who did the male. But yes, female character, I mean, anybody who's played Mass Effect knows what I'm talking about. The female characters are rarely the protagonist. You could use the test to see whether that female character is just a Ms. Pac-Man. And when I say that is a Ms. Pac-Man, is this female character just a female version of the male character? Or is she there only because of a relationship with the male character? It's the Smurfette syndrome, right? So it happens all the time.
James?
And notice also that these characters, when the female character is present, they tend to be in a highly sexualized form.
Yeah.
James.
Yeah, and how do we determine it? You know, what do they say? Put a bow on it? How do we know they're female? Because they have a bow on the top of their head, or lipstick.
Or these days, a skin-tight uniform.
Exactly, or very little armor at all. Maybe they're wearing almost nothing. Like that, right there.
Well, and another interesting thing to note is that a lot of times having a female character in a game isn't just, like, taken for granted. It's like a feature, like a special feature, like, ooh, we gave you a girl to choose from. It's not just kind of taken for granted. It's like, we're going to give you this as an extra thing.
Well, and in World of Warcraft, since we're using that as an example, many of the guys that I played with, they choose female characters to play, but they will be very careful to tell you that the reason they chose the female character is that they can, through their gameplay, watch her behind as she's running through the forest.
Yikes! All right, guests, take a breath for a moment, because James, who is our professional games designer, is being very quiet right now. I haven't heard a peek from him. Let's leave him some space so he can talk about why this would happen.
Well, I mean, for one thing, for a long time, and I feel awkward saying this as a white male, right? But we are a white male-dominated industry. For a long time, there were not a lot of voices in the room when we would have these discussions. And unfortunately, there's this self-perpetuating myth within our industry that female characters don't sell. I have been in boardrooms making the case for putting a female lead in the game, and we get told that female characters don't sell. And very often, the reason that this myth is self-perpetuating is that means that only a lot of the really under-the-radar games really do get female leads, and then those games always get pointed to as, hey, look, that didn't sell very well, had a female lead, that must be why. So it's this self-perpetuating cycle, and yet, luckily, over the past probably 2 to 3 years, I really think we've started to break this cycle as more women enter the games industry, and as independent development breaks out, you have a lot of games outside of the things you see advertised on TV that do have strong female leads or are looking into a lot of these issues.
And also, Femi, the studies have shown that games that have a female protagonist in them or a female hero get half the marketing budget of games that have a male lead in them. Half the marketing.
So I'm aging myself here a little bit, but what about Lara Croft? She was kind of, when I was a kid, she was like the big deal and seemed to set the standard.
Do you see Lara Croft as a feminist heroine?
No.
The problem is that Lara Croft...
She's a start, Celeste!
Unfortunately, I don't think she is, because she's designed for the male audience, right?
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of games are about a power fantasy, right? We're just trying to break out past this idea of game as power fantasy.
Sure.
And part of that power fantasy in a lot of these cases is having the sexy or retiring or shrinking violet hero, feminine hero who you have to save.
Let me tell you an anecdote about, for example, Ms. Pac-Man. And I go back to Ms. Pac-Man because she was one of the very first female leads in any video game. The original inventor, the designer of Pac-Man, said that he designed Pac-Man itself to appeal to women. And his idea behind the whole game was that he thought a game that focused on eating would attract women. Ooh. This kind of gives you the idea of what we're dealing with here.
But on the other hand, I gotta jump in because we are... One, I would say that a lot of media, a lot of modern media, portrays women very poorly, and it doesn't matter if it's games or films or
yeah, this is true. I mean, if we could be talking about movies right now, and everybody would think it was a movie conversation, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you talk about music the same way, pop music, right?
Yeah.
But I also want to jump in and say that if you look past that mainstream, right, there's a game that just came out called Always Sometimes Monsters, which does this amazing thing at the beginning of the game, right? It randomly rolls and sets all the characters in the game randomly by gender and by race, right? And then doesn't change anything else about the game. So any character in the game could be male or could be female, doesn't matter. All relationships happen whether or not they happen to be two men, two women, a man and a woman, right?
All right.
Well, James, you said that if we can look past the mainstream, and I will say that a lot of people online that are sending us comments can't or aren't willing to yet. Akash just tweeted in a few minutes ago. He says, even more troublesome is online gaming is legitimizing misogynistic behavior because there's no regulation or punishment for it. And Jenny, I also want you to have a look at this conversation that happened on Reddit.com, and I know that you're a moderator for this subreddit.
That's
one
my
person
comment.
writes in, one person, well, let me share for the rest of our audience. Guys taunt each other all the time, and we can't expect to be exempt. And of course, that's a female saying that. And then your comment.
Yeah. So she's kind of just comparing the two, and you can't say that men are treated the same as women. I mean, there was an OSU study done, Ohio State University study done recently showing that it indicated on average women received 3 times as many negative comments as men did.
But Jenny, this is more than just negative comments. For our audience that is not aware, what you wrote here is, I received rape threats. That's more than just a negative comment. What are the threats? What do they look like?
Well, so the kind of threats you receive are like, I've received messages. I received one from a guy telling me that he was going to impregnate me with triplets and then force me to have a very late-term abortion with strict mental abuse. That's verbatim what he said to me over a video game. That's the kind of stuff I receive as a female gamer. While I'm not doing anything out of the norm. I'm playing the game normally. I'm communicating normally. That's it. That kind of. I'd like to.
Stephen.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, to the point of regulation, I mean, I think this particular problem has existed before online gaming. I mean, this type of misogyny was around in Usenet newsgroups, for instance. It was just a smaller, more isolated population back when the internet was not as popular. And now people are starting to realize that you do need to moderate and have regulation. I think anonymity is one of the key problems that causes a lot of this behavior to go unpunished.
I agree.
Well, and I think this is a really, really important point that Stephen makes, because we're never going to solve it solely through games, right? We, as designers, as moderators, are going to do everything we can, because this is an awful problem. No one should have to undergo that in games, right? But as a white male, I have the privilege of walking around my city at midnight, not worrying about getting assaulted, not worrying about getting harassed by the cops, right? That is a privilege that every human being should have, and yet they don't. This sort of misogyny exists. It's just not socially acceptable at the surface level within our society as a whole, and we have to fix it on a societal level, because otherwise you're just plugging the dam a little bit by trying to fix it solely in games.
So guests, just take a pause for a moment. So let's just hold tight for a moment. I'll come straight back to you. Because you're all gamers, you know the kind of critique, abuse that you might get in the gaming world. So I'm going to play this for people who are new to this experience. And this is a little bit of cross assault. Have a listen very carefully to what's happening in this game.
All right, the next time you make a mistake like that, I'm going to smell you. Real close, too. I'm gonna do it for your boyfriend.
Oh,
shout out to your boyfriend.
Don't say that.
What's his name? I'm gonna say his name while I'm smelling you.
Don't say that.
I'm gonna smell you. I'm gonna smell you for your boyfriend. What's his name? Yikes. Celeste, what were you going to say? I mean,
well,
I'm sure you've come across this before.
Not in any way, shape, or form uncommon. I mean, that's really, really common, what you just heard. In fact, that's relatively mild.
Exactly. I couldn't find many stuff that didn't have cursing all over it.
Yeah, and I should say, I mean, nobody here is saying that gamers are horrible people, or that male gamers are horrible people, or white male gamers. I mean, I married a white male gamer that I met through the game that I played for 10 years. But what I have found, and I say this over and over again, is that when I'm in a situation where someone starts saying really inappropriate things, or threatening things, or misogynistic things, very often it only takes one guy to stand up and say, whoa, dude, enough. That is totally inappropriate. That's not okay. And then all these other guys who were sitting there silent and maybe too afraid to say anything or hesitant to speak up, they will suddenly back that guy up. It really only takes one or two guys to cut through the testosterone cloud. And going back to Jenny, I wanted Jenny to be able to respond as well, because that comment they made about guys taunt each other all the time, I mean, you have to imagine if you have a whole room of, say, white people, and they're making cracks on each other, teasing each other about being white or whatever it is, and then a black guy walks in, that doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden start teasing him about being black. And in the same thing in gaming, you can't have an entire room full of men ribbing each other and then all of them turn on the girl and start ribbing on her for being female. It's a different situation.
That's exactly it. It's kind of the taunting or the ribbing that goes on between men is very different, because I've heard it range from everything from like their skill level, which is totally legitimate in a gaming setting. You can pick on someone for their skill level. That's just normal. But with women, they're targeted because of their voice, because of their gamer tag, pointing out their gender. They're targeted specifically and only because of their gender, and that is very, very wrong. I mean, and the thing you said, Celeste, about people speaking up to you, I don't have that happen hardly ever. With my friends, they'll say something, but if I'm just in a room of randoms, like random players, it's happened once or twice out in 7 years that someone has said to another person, dude, that's not appropriate. I've had guys say that they want to brush my hair. I had a dude whisper at me creepily once that he wanted me to take my clothes off and take a bath, and everyone just laughs and acts like it doesn't matter because it's occurring in an online setting. The thing is this kind of like harassment, this sexism, the bigotry, it's not acceptable in the real world. Why do we pretend that it's okay just because it's happening online?
Well, Jenny, it's interesting you said that there's actually someone in our community who's saying somewhat along the lines of the same thing. Have a listen to this video comment.
When you look at the sexism and misogyny that exist in real life, it's no surprise that it shows up online. I believe that there should be consequences for such behavior, but that they shouldn't come from the top down or be punitive. Rather, there should be a collective disavowal of sexism and misogyny as acceptable forms of human interaction, both online and in real life. I also believe it's up to men to take the initiative in checking the behavior of their fellow men, online and in real life.
So, Stephen, he talks about men taking the initiative. You earlier mentioned anonymity, and there's this tweet from Rosie who says, anonymity is insurance against consequences. So what is being done in the gaming world to ensure people either use their real names or have less of an incentive to think they can get away with this?
That's a very complex question because it's different for every different type of gaming platform that is out there. There's no one game. You have different communities that interact in different ways. People on Warcraft, for instance, don't interact with people on Xbox at the same time. But the long story short for me is I believe that everything that the guests have said in that particular comment makes sense. I think it starts with a lot of men realizing their own sort of role in the problem and then being able to police themselves and help call out that bad behavior. Then the third piece is the systems and protections that are being placed by some technologies to help people experience if they feel they need to report someone who's gotten out of line, and then for the moderation of the community itself to be strong, forceful, and instantaneous.
But the key is we really have to encourage people towards better behavior rather than strictly punish for bad behavior, because we've seen how unproductive that is in society in general. And in fact, most games do have fairly stringent punishments for bad behavior, and that alone isn't a solution.
What are the
I don't know about that.
Yeah, what are the punishments?
I don't know about that.
James, what are the punishments?
I was just going to say, one of the punishments, I mean, for example, I would never play Call of Duty. I can't even put those headphones on and listen to that. It's too much.
Because?
The language, look, I'm a journalist. I've heard really, really bad language. But the racist comments, the things that get said, that is just not, that's like going into the
It's
worst.
like rolling in a pit of razor blades and then jumping into a pool filled with lemon juice.
Yeah, imagine just like the roughest, drunkest male locker room you've ever been in.
Wow.
No.
All right.
But, for example, on something like Rift or Diablo, a community, a social community, basically, you will put in a complaint about someone who said something just like, I can't even repeat it on civilized television, and nothing really they'll get a warning from the people, or they'll investigate and say, oh, it's he said, she said, and we can't take action.
All right, Celeste, we've got a minute. All right, so guess we've got a minute to go. Celeste, what would you want to happen then?
It has to be a multi-pronged approach. It has to come from the gamers, the game developers, and the business community as well.
Jenny?
I just really think people need to start making this not normalized behavior is one of the key things, and that's one of the things we're going to come back to time and again. The community developers can only do so much. It's really in the hands of the player at some point.
Yeah. Stephen?
I think it's a societal problem first and foremost that anonymity on the internet helps foster, and I think that's a key place we can also help.
Wow. Okay, so I'm taking all of these guests to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. If you've got questions you want to ask them, it's not too late. You can tweet them to #AJStream. Let me just tell you about our next show. Why do Hong Kong activists say that ethnic minority children are the lost generation? They will tell us live on our next program. Until then, we'll see you online. Thanks for watching. So hello again, I'm Femi OK. This is the stream's post show where our online community gets to ask what they couldn't ask maybe during the main show. So Malika Bilal is working overtime trying to get all your tweets into the program. We're talking about misogyny online in video games. I have to show you something which is really interesting. This comes from Jenny's website and she says, have a look on my laptop, somebody she's Facebooking with, did you seriously take the time to look me up on Facebook? Aha, of course, it took 15 seconds. That's incredibly weird, says Jenny, in case you were not fully aware. I never said I was normal. You shouldn't use your real name as your gamer tag. That's dangerous these days. I can't read any more of this, Jenny. It's making me slightly freak out. There is a moment where people take these games so seriously that they go offline and then take what might be just cursing and maybe bad behavior into the real world. What can you tell me about that?
Well, he was harassing me. This particular guy was harassing me online because he felt that I cheated in a game because I beat him, and of course women can't be good at video games legitimately in this guy's mind. Right. So then he took the time to look up Jenny Hanover on Facebook and then send me a message, I think a day or two later, and then give me a lecture on online safety as if I wasn't already aware because I'm an adult. And this is the first time in 7 years that issue has ever come up.
Ah, okay.
So it says more about him than about the fact that I used the name Jenny Hanover online.
Sure.
Because that's completely creepy and utterly bizarre. I can't even imagine what would possess a human being to want to do that.
Yeah. You must have really
it gets even worse sometimes.
Yes, tell us.
Like, myself and my friends have actually had SWAT teams sent to our homes where someone figures out where we live and then calls the police pretending to live in our neighborhood by using Google Voice or some other type of technology, and the police go, oh, there's a drug lab in the neighborhood, and so they send the SWAT team.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Tell me the mentality behind that, Stephen, because that's just bizarre for me.
In most cases, again, it's a lack of consequences. It's usually children. It's usually 12 to 14-year-old children who have now the technology, and unfortunately our infrastructure in the United States is just not really set up to deal with that as a threat vector. So they bias towards sending a SWAT team instead of trying to figure out, well, this is a totally anonymous phone call. Should we send a SWAT team for that? And unfortunately right now they don't do that.
Stephen, what did you actually say to the SWAT team? I was playing this game and somebody didn't like me, and how do you explain yourself?
You essentially be very careful to make sure you don't alarm them, to let them know that they have been fooled, and to give them, the access that they're requesting. The challenge is that not everybody knows this is a threat. I and some of my friends who have been hit before know this is a threat. So people's pets have been shot because they didn't know, or it's an unfortunate, very unfortunate problem in our society. It's just a weapon that people can use.
Well, James, talking about the crossover into real life, between reality and real life, we actually got this question just a couple minutes ago. Sheikh Ismail writes in, could there be a correlation between a gamer's real life anger and their style of play or their intentions, James?
So we've seen lots of studies, and I mean, study after study shows that there's not a link between games and violence. There is a link between frustration and violence, and unfortunately, especially a lot of the competitive games, when someone is losing and they've nothing to blame but themselves, there is a lot of that frustration, right? The closer a game gets to being not random, where you have to either accept that you're losing or blame someone around you, the more of that outburst that you'll see.
Celeste, what did you want to add?
I just wanted to say before we start thinking that going into gaming is like walking into a drug lord's den. There's a lot of this real life extension that actually is really good and positive. There was a guild in World of Warcraft that when a family member went missing, they turned to their guild, their online guild, to help find him, and they found him. There was a guy who got deployed to Afghanistan, and his one big connection in the way that he kept in touch with his family were his gamer friends who watched out for his kids and watched his dog. And I know another woman who moved to Texas, and her gamer friends let her live with her for 6 months, live with them for 6 months until she found a job. I mean, there's a lot of really positive, wonderful social interaction going on. We're talking about the few bad players who end up poisoning the pot for everybody else.
It is definitely a minority of people who act in this inappropriate manner. It's just a really particularly loud and hard to ignore minority.
Yes.
Malika.
We actually got a comment that's interesting. This is from a former stream guest, and I'd like all of our guests to have a listen to this before you let me know your thoughts.
This isn't a sexism problem, it's an everybody problem. Everyone gets bullied online. According to some studies, men get cyberbullied and abused more than women do, and the main target is 19-year-old males. So the nature of the abuse is different. If you're a woman, you might get called sexist things. If you're a man, you might be accused of being gay or something. It's whatever they think will get to you. But to characterize it as a sexism problem isn't accurate.
So Stephen, as a former head of enforcement, is this something that you saw men report as well?
Not really. What we saw a lot of people reporting in same-sex to same-sex contact that they found objectionable was really just yelling at each other or insulting them. And it wasn't to the level of death threats. It wasn't to the level of sexual assault threats or anything of that nature. We really did not see that as nearly the problem that we saw the other direction, where it was typically men versus women and doing these extreme, very extreme threats.
Yeah, we're talking about gaming here. I mean, we have to remember, we're talking about gaming. We're not talking about the whole internet. We're talking about a specific place in the internet where it is very gender specific, and the gender that gets targeted is female.
I'm just going to get everybody to look at my laptop, because this is Jenny's Twitter feed here. And Jenny, I mean, it's almost your mission here to kind of stamp out this whole idea of sexual harassment in gaming. As you've made it your mission, as you do a lot of work in this area, how much results have you seen so far?
Results as in like lessening of sexual harassment, or I'm unsure.
Yeah, exactly. If this is something that you talk about a lot,
I haven't really noticed
how much
any
impact?
difference.
Why are you doing it then?
Because it's being discussed more. That's the good thing. My aim is to educate people, to show them that this is an issue, to show other women that they're not alone, and anyone who feels kind of alienated in gaming, because gaming is supposed to be fun. The fact that I have people telling me that they avoid online gaming or specific aspects of it because they're afraid of being harassed and threatened, that's completely ridiculous. So, but the thing is we've been seeing an influx of articles, discussions. I've been a part of university lectures. It's becoming an actual field of discussion and study, this sexism and bigotry in online gaming. And the more people talk about it, the more we're going to start to be like, we should probably find a solution. We need to fix this. This can't go on. And, you know, people say it's just a part of gaming. That's nonsense. Yeah, people get harassed, but to say that it's not really sexism because everyone gets targeted and they're just trying to hurt your feelings. I get really upset at other people when I game online sometimes. I've never used bigoted terminology to try and attack and hurt them. It's just, that's kind of an excuse, and it doesn't really hold it down.
Or rape them, or set their hair on fire, or, murder their boyfriend, which was one of the threats that I got.
You know, guess what I find very confusing is if we looked at the last decade of advertising, the last decade of movies, the last decade of any kind of popular entertainment, there have been sort of baby steps towards being, I don't know, less bigoted, less sexist. But why in the gaming world are we still seeing some very extreme forms of sexism and misogyny? James.
Are we seeing extreme ones? I mean, remember, Femi, there's not a lot of, you know what the Bechdel test is, right? That's the test
do you want to just share that with all of us? Yeah.
In order to pass the Bechdel test created by Alison Bechdel, a film has to have two female characters who talk to each other, not about a man.
Right.
Now remember, neither Star Wars nor Lord of the Rings trilogies passed the Bechdel test. Okay, we're not talking about this just being a gaming problem. As Stephen has pointed out, and I think James also, this is a societal problem. But we got to start one step at a time. And we as gamers can start with gaming.
We're talking about starting as one step at a time. We actually got this suggestion from someone on Facebook. Jane says there should be in-game consequences. Banning should be more heavily enforced on players who express such nonsense, she writes. James, are there enough in-game consequences for people who do things that others don't particularly like?
And Stephen will tell you more about this, but I mean, the answer is actually yes. Unfortunately, we're really, really bad about messaging it to our community. Believe it or not, developers just the other day, right? League of Legends, the Riot Games, they just banned 2 of their top players, guys who play this professionally, right? Guys who are on star teams that get watched by millions of people around the globe, and they just banned 2 of those players, right? NFL, you can get convicted for dogfighting and be welcomed back, right? You can be a murderer and be welcomed back. games, you say some bad stuff online, and these guys are lifetime banned from their one source of income, right? So we actually do it a lot, and Stephen will tell you about the thousands of people he's banned in his time. Unfortunately, we're really bad at messaging people. I go into companies all the time where we don't tell you. We don't send you an email afterwards saying, yeah, we looked at your complaint, that person's been banned, right? We do it, and then we don't notify the people who got harassed, right? We don't empower the people who this is hurting.
Right. I'm
also a big fan of.
Go ahead, Steve. Make a quick point because I have to wrap up very quickly. So just go ahead.
I like what we call reputation crowding, where if your reputation falls a certain amount, you only get matched with other players at your reputation or lower.
Oh, that's good.
See, it's actually really bad because that's prisoner's island. That's the same thing that shoving all these people together normalizes it. You have a 16-year-old who's harassing people because he's having a bad day, he's not having a good home life, and you put him with a bunch of adults who do this all the time. You get that kid out of there, just like getting the kid out of the prison system, and they're better at being this horrible person.
All right, so
we can do better than that.
All right, so guests, all take a collective breath because I just want to ask one more thing. I want to end on a positive interaction. Can we show World of Warcraft one more time? Do we have it on Twitch TV? It's that online TV channel. All right, I do not get, Celeste Headley, how you managed to meet your husband and woo him and he woo you through World of Warcraft. Tell us the story very briefly.
It's the most romantic thing you can think of because the physicality is not involved. My husband, listen, there's no way while you're dating a guy you're gonna get him to sit there and talk to you for 4.5 hours at a time. But when you're gaming and that's all you have,
right?
He and I would have 4 and 5 hour conversations. I mean, it was actually very, very romantic and sweet. I mean, it extended over years, but it was basically a years long distance relationship.
Did you kiss in World of Warcraft then? Do you kiss your man? No. Oh, look at that face. You can tell I've never played this game.
It's not like Second Life.
I need to join Second Life, I think. Anyway, Celeste and Jenny and James and Stephen, you make me want to be a gamer. If you're gamers, then I would like to be one as well. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. So, on the next show, what are we doing? Well, we're going to be going to Hong Kong, where activists say that ethnic minority children are the lost generation. And they will tell us why live on the stream. Until then, see you online. Take care.